Hey, I'm Jonathan, and here are 5 great science fiction adaptations where I have read the book, and I feel like the film did the book justice and is worth your time. So let's get started with the big one that stomped on and ripped apart all that came before it, Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was written by Michael Crichton and published in 1990, and the film was directed by Steven Spielberg in 1993. When I was a kid, I loved dinosaurs. I had a big book with pictures and dinosaur facts that I loved reading over and over again. And I was so excited when I was finally old enough that my parents let me watch Jurassic Park. The film does a phenomenal job of capturing the awe and amazement of seeing dinosaurs for the first time. It's a premise that works because it's a theme park that many people would genuinely want to go to. At least until the unintended consequences kick in. The film is well cast and the visual effects were well ahead of its time. The filmmakers did an amazing job of displaying a great variety of dinosaurs in iconic and thrilling scenes. And something that's still very enjoyable is the soundtrack. I remember I was in a 7th grade music class and we had to pick a film scene to present to the class that was enhanced by the music. And I chose the training montage from Rocky with Sylvester Stallone running up the steps, and I was pretty proud of myself. But then the next kid gets up and presents the helicopter arrival scene from Jurassic Park, and I was like, dang, that's a pretty good choice. Ultimately, Jurassic Park ended up grossing $1.057 billion at the box office on a $63 million budget, which at the time was the #1 highest grossing film in cinema history. So, when I finally got around to reading the book last year, how did it compare to the movie? I didn't find a ton of surprises in the book, as the film is rather faithful to the source material, and that makes sense as Michael Crichton was hired to write the screenplay, although it did go through several rounds of revisions and rewrites through other writers. Something that the book spends a little bit more time expanding is the science behind bringing the dinosaurs back to life, and as someone that likes hard science fiction, this is an element of the book that I enjoyed. A disclaimer some fellow readers gave me before picking up the book was that at times the kids can be a bit annoying. And I remember thinking, yeah, they're kids in a scary situation. I'll cut them some slack. How annoying can they really be? The answer? So annoying! I know that Lex is only 7 or 8 in the book, but the amount of times that she's told, you have to be quiet or else we're all gonna die. And she just won't be quiet. At a certain point, I was like, you know what? I'm Team Dinosaur. Let's eat some kids. And so I think most of the character changes from the book to the film were for the better, as they gave the characters clearer motivations and arcs, and gave us some characters to root for. So how are the book and film regarded by audiences today? Well, to give you a quick snapshot, the book has a 4.09 out of 5 rating on Goodreads, and the film has an 8.2 out of 10 on IMDb. So these two are regarded fairly equally, and I enjoyed them both, but personally, I might have to say that this is one of the rare times that the film did indeed outdo the book. Alright, up next we move on to one that wasn't as much of a hit, but a film that I'm personally a fan of, A Scanner Darkly. A Scanner Darkly was written by Philip K. Dick and published in 1977, and the film was directed by Richard Linklater in 2006. The film is most well known for its unique visual style. It was shot digitally and then animated using rotoscoping. It gives the film a surreal look that perfectly matches the trippy paranoia that pervades this near-future dystopian setting. The film also features a brilliant cast of Keanu Reeves, Robert Downey Jr., Woody Harrelson, and Winona Ryder. They all do a great job of delivering the comedic dialogue, as well as conveying some of the heavier underlying themes. I watched the film many years before reading the book, so when I got to the book, I had forgotten certain plot points, but what I did remember was a particular tone and atmosphere. Perhaps watching the movie first influenced my reading experience, but I have read several PKD books, and I think that particular style of his was captured fantastically in this film. One of the highlights of the book was reading Philip K. Dick's afterword, which contextualized the story in a personal way, and for me, increased the impact of the story and themes. While I very much enjoyed it, the film was not a commercial success, bringing in only $7.7 million at the box office on an $8.7 million budget. If I had to guess why, all I can think of is that adult animation doesn't have a very large or broad audience, particularly in the US market. However, the people that did watch it mostly seemed to enjoy it. The book has a 4.02 rating out of 5 on Goodreads, and the film a 7.0 rating on IMDb. Personally, I would rate it just a little bit higher, and I think it is definitely worth your time to go read the book and then watch the film. Alright, up next we have an absolute classic, one that is beloved by film students and still being watched on campuses all across the nation, 2001: A Space Odyssey. 2001: A Space Odyssey was written by Arthur C. Clarke and published in 1968, and the film was directed by Stanley Kubrick and also released in 1968. Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke worked together in order to create the story for 2001: A Space Odyssey that would ultimately become both a book and a screenplay. There's a great foreword from Clarke in the 25th anniversary edition that details his experience working with the unique character that is Kubrick. So is this technically an adaptation? I'd say so because The Sentinel, Clarke's short story, among others, was used as inspiration for the story. But yes, it is just as much a collaboration as it is an adaptation. Both the practical and visual effects set a new standard for science fiction in cinema and depicted space travel in a realistic way. It also had a huge impact on audiences as the film was both equal parts thought-provoking and confusing. While at times the film can feel a little slow and cryptic, it provided us with many iconic scenes, including The Dawn of Man and Open the Pod Bay Doors, Hal. The film also has a fantastic score, which is used in contrast with the sparse dialogue and the quiet of space. Despite the fact the film somewhat confused audiences at the time, it was a commercial success. It ended up grossing $146 million on a $10.5 million budget. For the most part, the book tells the same story as the film. However, I still think it is a great complementary read. There are a few differences, and it also expands a little on some things, gives you a few extra details when it comes to some things like Hal, the monolith, and the Stargate. There are parts of the novel that are just a little bit dry, but if you don't mind some hard science in your sci-fi, then I still think it's an engaging read. And what it lacks in character development, it more than makes up for in mind-blowing ideas. The ending of both the book and the film is just an absolute trip. Both the book and the film are regarded as classics. The book has a 4.17 rating on Goodreads, and the film has an 8.3 rating on IMDb. Personally, I also love them both pretty equally. I think if you enjoy the feeling of being confused while watching a movie, then I would watch the movie first and then read the book. If you like to understand the movie a little bit more, then I would read the book first, then watch the movie. Okay, for our fourth adaptation, we have one that's a little bit more polarizing, and that is Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas was written by David Mitchell and published in 2004, and the film was directed by the Wachowskis and Tom Tykwer in 2012. It's way too long, parts of it are kinda goofy, and yet, I still liked it. The most famous aspect of the novel is its structure. The novel is comprised of 6 stories that are split into halves and told in the order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the movie does not follow that famous structure, but I don't fault the film for that. As David Mitchell himself said, you can't ask a viewer of a film to begin a film 6 times. The movie takes a complicated narrative structure and reassembles it, and while the direction isn't always clear, I think it does a good job of bringing it all together in the end. The film was a box office flop. It only brought in $130.5 million on an estimated $100 to $146.7 million. So why didn't it succeed? If I had to guess, I'd say the audience might have been put off by the almost 3-hour runtime and reports of the overly complex storylines. The stories in Cloud Atlas aren't concretely linked. It's something ethereal that you can't quite grasp, kind of like a cloud. So while there may not be a huge narrative payoff, I really emotionally connected with the themes and thought it stuck the landing thematically. My personal favourite stories were that of Robert Frobisher and Sonmi 451. The character of Timothy Cavendish also provided some enjoyable comedic relief as well. The film has a phenomenal soundtrack that helps tie the stories together with some beautiful motifs. And I also found the ending of the film to be extremely powerful. When compared to the book, I thought the film had some of the same strengths and weaknesses. My least favourite story in the book was the 6th story, the one set furthest in the future, and that was also not one of my favourites in the film either. Sometimes the book felt more so clever than it was actually enjoyable to read, but I still enjoyed how ambitious it was in terms of language and scope. The book currently has a 4.01 rating on Goodreads, and the film has a 7.4 on IMDb. Personally, I think despite its flaws, it's still worth giving the film a chance. And just quickly before we get to our final film, if you're enjoying the video, feel free to smash or just gently click the subscribe button, and if you're really enjoying it, check out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs like Neema and a New Eden. And speaking of androids, our fifth and final film for today's video is Blade Runner 2049. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was written by Philip K. Dick and published in 1968. The film Blade Runner was directed by Ridley Scott in 1982, and the film Blade Runner 2049 was directed by Denis Villeneuve in 2017. Both of these films are worth your time, but allow me to explain why I want to talk about Blade Runner 2049. Hi, I'm me from 2017. Hey, I'm you wearing a hat. Sweet hat. Thanks. Hey, who's your favorite actor? Ryan Gosling. Who's your favorite director? Denis Villeneuve. Who's your favorite composer? Hans Zimmer. Who's your favorite cinematographer? Roger Deakins. Wow. Boy, do I have some good news for you. So on paper, Blade Runner 2049 should be one of my favorite science fiction films. Did it live up to expectations? Yes. As expected, the soundtrack is phenomenal and the cinematography is absolutely stunning. Yes, the film is a little bit long, but how can I complain about that when every single scene is just a feast for the senses? Add to that, Ryan Gosling gives one of my favorite performances, as does Ana de Armas. As a sequel, it's not as similar narratively, but I think it does a great job of diving further into some of the same themes, including artificial intelligence and memory. The film made $267.7 million at the box office on an estimated budget of around $150 to $185 million, which doesn't sound too bad, but that means it did actually lose money. The reported target that the film needed to hit in order to break even was $400 million at the box office. So why didn't it do better? I guess that audience suspected it might be a little long and pretentious. And it's a bit long and pretentious, but it's great. And you have to remember that Blade Runner wasn't actually a commercial success initially either. It became a cult hit over time. And I think the same could be true for Blade Runner 2049. When it comes to PKD books, I think I slightly preferred A Scanner Darkly, as I thought it did such a good job of tying all of its messages together. However, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is still very creative, and I thought it did a very touching job of exploring themes to do with empathy and the treatment of animals. Both the book and film are fairly well regarded by readers and viewers, with a 4.09 and 8.0 rating respectively. I would highly recommend reading the book, watching Blade Runner, then watching Blade Runner 2049. So there you go guys, this is far from a comprehensive list, so comment down below some of your favorite science fiction adaptations, as well as your thoughts on these 5. I hope you enjoyed the video, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.